I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, "No, no, 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 we're going to do this." And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender. Capella University is rethinking higher education. With its game-changing FlexPath learning format, you can earn your degree on your schedule and fit your education seamlessly into your life. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show. Today on the James Altucher Show.
When I heard Brandon Webb was a best-selling romance author, I couldn't believe it. I said, you have to come on the podcast. You're not only ex-military, ex-Navy SEAL, you were head of the Navy SEAL sniper school. Now you're a romance novelist. And then he told me, and guess what? I just sold my thriller novel for $500,000 and it's going to be made into a movie. And then he described the process of what had happened and how data-driven it was. Anyway, you'll hear it from him, but then we also talked about what's happening in the world. Could there be a civil war? We talked about how to write a thriller novel, all sorts of stuff. We talked about the business issues during this pandemic, all the opportunities. He's supposed to send me the paper about how to identify the right Amazon category to write a thriller novel in. I'll describe that in a future podcast. Here's the interview. I've got Brandon Webb on, longtime guest, ex-Navy SEAL, author of a bunch of New York Times best-selling books. But I first wanted to talk to Brandon about a special project he's involved in involving military romance novels. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me again.
And then I want to talk about the impending civil war in the United States, but we'll save that for later.
Yeah.
So I remember you told me like a few years ago how you were searching for a category where there was demand, but there wasn't a lot of supply, and you figured out algorithmically somehow that military romance was this category. You got a deal to do these military romance novels. You had a ghostwriter write them, and now you're telling me you got even a brand new deal in this category. So this is all correct, right?
Yeah, correct. With the exception, it was an MBA project that I did, and so it was data-driven, not algorithm-driven decision. But yeah, essentially, I figured out that it was an underserved category and a category that historically did well up or down economy and was just in demand all the time. So, and what was interesting is after I got the report back, it kind of made sense to me because I was getting approached on social media by all these women romance writers who were trying to kind of break into this category of military romance, but they just didn't have the technical background. But they were, I was being nice initially, which I believe in, but then it turned into abuse, right? It was like the 3 questions turned into a 100 question Word document. And I was like, sorry, lady, I'm not, I'm not your consultant.
It's because they knew, these romance novelists knew there was demand, but they just didn't know anything about the military.
Yeah, they didn't understand how, because everyone wants, especially if it was popular, they were trying to write these books, these sexy romance books about the Navy SEALs, but they had no idea like what's it take to be a SEAL, the training, how things are structured and all this stuff. And so I went to, I had a relationship with St. Martin's Press, which is Macmillan Publishing. And I said, look, I did this report. I'm very knowledgeable on the military. I'm not really keen to write steamy, romance novels, but can we get a writer to pair with me, and we'll write, some really authentic books. And I said, I don't want to be on the cover. I don't want any credit at all. The first book, I got a creative director credit on the back, which I was fine with, but, and they said yes. So I did a multi-book deal with them. The first one was called The Military Wife.
Okay, hold on, I gotta look it up. Hold on, The Military Wife.
Yeah,
that's like the perfect title. Also, it's it's going to be a romance, and it's going to have to do with the military. Here's The Military Wife, book 1 of 2 by Laura Trentham. 179 reviews, which is really good, and it looks great. So let me just see the subject. So a young widow embraces a second chance at life when she reconnects with those who understand the sacrifices made by American soldiers. Boom.
Yeah. And we did the whole series, like Heart of a Hero series is kind of how I branded it also.
Was it initially planned that you would do a series?
Yeah. Yeah, that was the plan. It was to kind of do a series. And the book's done well. I mean, these things, they just sell and sell and sell. It's one of the, it doesn't kind of, it has a long shelf life, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So this book came out in February of 2019. Let me look up my classic book, Choose Yourself. This is mine. I'm only 4.4 out of 5. This is a higher rated book than my book. So congratulations on writing such a high quality book. How many books did you write with Laura? So first of all, what did the deal look like? Did you split things 50-50 with her?
No, you know what? I'll just be candid for your listeners. So Laura is writing under a pen name. The issue that we ended up having was she wasn't aware of the structure of the deal. She thought I was actually a consultant on the project, and she was being paid as a staff, kind of like, a one-time writer, what they do. Because we had a bit of creative difference on the second book. We've done 2 books together, and she's a great writer. But we had, like some creative conflict on the book, and then she found out that I was kind of the what do they call that in The Wizard of Oz? I was the guy behind the curtain, right? And I owned everything. She got really triggered by that, and so I don't
it's almost as if you were like a movie producer and you were producing this book.
Yeah, and I said, look, it is what it is. But she's a great writer. But as you and I know, there's lots of great writers out there. It's just about execution.
Well, so did she write book 2?
Yeah, she did write book 2. Did a great job.
And then, so I mean, can you okay, so there's so many questions. So I'll start off with, and I'm going to ask the financial ones. I'm also going to ask the formulaic ones, like what's the formula for a romance, and then we're going to talk about your current deal, and maybe other stuff you've done in this area. But what was the data? What were you looking for? I mean, obviously you're already an expert on military, and romance is a popular category in general. Was that what influenced you, or was there anything more data driven than that?
I mean, it was all of the data that I looked at was that the sales, there was just, like you said, it was a simple supply and demand. equation. It was the demand was massive and the supply was low, and so I just said that makes sense. And ironically, my own mother named me after a trashy romance novel called The Flower and the Flame. She actually mailed it to me in New York. I got it at my bookshelf. I was some steamy pirate captain that forced himself on this, settler's daughter and had some romance. Some settler coming to America from the UK. And so,
What do you mean your mother
England,
named you? Like what?
Yeah, I was either going to be D'Artagnan because she loved the Three Musketeers, or Brandon because she read this trashy book and was like in love with this pirate captain character. So I was named after a romance novel, and so I just
I
found
see.
it,
When you were born.
yeah.
That's funny.
So so she gave me the name for the book. But it was that simple, and like the book, I got a mid six figure deal, and I think we're starting to earn out the royalties. But as you know, typically you need to do multiple books in the category before you start seeing any meaningful royalties
for a genre.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so what convinced you though that this was it something where it was like the top books were very highly ranked on Amazon? Like what category specifically? Like what was just your process of saying, hey, this is a category I should get into? Like if I'm listening to this and I want to write a genre fiction, how should I go about finding the right category for me?
So interestingly enough, I had read an interview with who's the author of it was the author of The Firm.
Yeah, John Grisham.
Forget his name. Yeah, Grisham, and I believe it was Grisham that said he was looking at what does he write about, and he ended up figuring out that actually law, which he had experience with, was a good category. So I think because literally anybody that wants to write can self-publish these days, it's like content in general is just all over the place, but there's not, usually the cream rises to the top. So the good content breaks out typically, but it's just so noisy. So I looked at this as, okay, this is a category, and specifically the research paper that the MBAs gave me, when I said to look at, I said, what is an opportunity in fiction? Like, what is the underserved niche? And it was clearly romance, but as a subcategory, military romance. And I said, well, that makes sense because all these women have been asking me about, asking me to help them describe a military environment so they could write better romance for their characters. And I just said, you know what? I'm a big believer in, I like to execute and I like to experiment. And I said, you know what, this will either do, it'll probably do well. Maybe it'll do really, really well.
But how do they determine military romance?
Well, specifically, as a plot, like as a main plot line, it has to deal with the military environment. So if you look on Amazon, you can find out there's tons of guys with no shirts on the covers of these books, and they've got like the bullets, around their chest and stuff like that. And so it's truly, in a military setting, with a romantic plot line.
But was there any like data, like, something they saw in the Amazon sales rankings? Like, how did they know that there was? How did they know there was low supply but high demand?
Because they looked at basically all the public numbers they could get. So it was directly related to sales, and that over like a 20-year period, the sales were always, were always pretty steady regardless of recession. In fact, I think it was during a recession, the sales went up. So it was basically the data that I was looking at was all related to sales data, Amazon, Walmart, Target.
Like if I wanted to find a category that, fits my background, for instance, and on the genre side, what data should I look at? Like, how can I figure it out?
I mean, what I asked them to do was look at the entire vertical, and I think there's enough public information on book sales and book rankings that are out there, especially with Amazon, and they just put it into, they gathered the data, but I would say to anybody, just look at the entire market and see, you once you see what the market is in fiction, you can chop it up, right? It's science fiction, fantasy, romance, historical fiction, like James Michener, one of my favorites, who wrote Hawaii, Afghanistan, a bunch of other ones. But then you see, okay, this category is crowded or not crowded, and there's a demand for it or not much demand. But it's not that hard to. I just, the reason I got the MBA class to do it is because it was time consuming, and I just wanted help. But it's not that hard to look at the vertical and see, okay, where are the opportunities here? And trust me, I was hoping it would be, because I love science fiction. I was hoping I would be writing about, Navy SEALs
In space.
doing missions on Mars, yeah, in space. It just wasn't the case.
So like for instance, this falls into the category of war fiction. I'm just trying to understand what they looked at.
I'll actually see if I can dig up the report and I'll send it to you.
Okay, yeah,
I'd be happy to share it with you.
Yeah, that'd be great. And then I could
I don't even mind if you share it with your audience. I have no issue with that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Let them see it. Yeah.
Because I see there's war fiction. This is also in the category of women's friendship fiction, and so on. I'm just curious how they saw that there was a lack of supply. So, because clearly there's like a lot of demand, but maybe they saw that there wasn't any recent books, or I'm just curious, like what data specifically they were looking at.
I think they look at, because I recently did a video game project, and it was related to kind of doing a market analysis of the military games, first person shooter games. And I was biased thinking, wow, the Call of Duty, Fortnite, all these kind of massively played games are it must be a super crowded space. But when you compared the military first person shooter games, the number of titles in the market compared to the users, it was, and then you take that and you compare it to like a Sims game, and there are tons of Sims games. And so I'm in this 2-year Harvard Business School program, and one of my classmates, Christina, owns Maximum Games in San Francisco, and she did the study, and she's like, wow, I'm surprised too. There's just not a lot of, the category for first person shooters is not crowded at all. There's plenty of room, plenty of market share. So it's more a case of the market's very big, but it's being served only by a few authors in that case. And in the video game sense, only a few publishers. When you look at the other categories, market's very big, but there's just tons of different video game publishers kind of going into that market, the hunting video games, the sim video games, all these other, the fantasy stuff. And so that's kind of what it was. It was market size is big. There's only a few authors serving this very big market, so there's plenty of room for new people to come into the space. And so that's how I arrived at the decision. The other interesting thing is I did a passion project fiction. I had an idea for a book based on the fact before I was a Navy SEAL, I was a search and rescue swimmer in helicopters on the Abraham Lincoln, which is a nuclear aircraft carrier.
I didn't know that.
The Navy had just said, hey, we're putting women on ships and combat roles. So we went on this 6-month deployment to the Middle East, stopping in Hawaii, Hong Kong, Thailand, and then we go to the Middle East and we kind of come back and hit all those spots in Australia. But we have women on the ship now, and we're trying to figure things out. Well, we had a sexual predator on the ship, and he assaulted, I think, 6-7 women, and they never caught him. Like the entire 6-month deployment.
So even though there's a limited population, like you knew it had to be one of these 1,000 men, couldn't they do DNA or anything like that?
The thing is, they're not equipped. It's a warship,
Uh-huh.
and they're not equipped. They're equipped to kind of deal with guys, men and women coming back drunk and disorderly or breaking the rules, but they have no detailed criminal investigative system. It's just not set up for that. And so I thought, imagine if it was like a Hannibal Lecter type character on an aircraft carrier that's using the fact that it's a 5,000 plus crew. It's a warship kind of city, and people, like in any city, people die, they commit suicide, they fall off the ship, they get blown over the side because they're not paying attention on the flight deck. And using this chaotic kind of military warship and everything that goes on, plus a bad leader, a bad captain, who's having a lot of mishaps, like using that to his advantage. And so I wrote this book based on that sexual predator and all my experiences. And my point is, like, I put my heart and soul in this thing, and it was very well received. Like, I got the book halfway written, and I asked John Mann, and I write together quite a bit. And I asked John, I said, hey, do you want to help me finish this? Because it's taken me so many years. And so him and I collaborated. We got the book finished. In the pandemic, we went to auction, and we got $500,000 for it. And
oh my God,
like
congratulations.
Thanks.
And so
and it looks like we're going to get the movie sold because they're bidding on that now. My point is, when you deliver good product, good content, if it is excellent stuff, I feel like it's going to do well, regardless of the competition, right? Because you just delivered superior product, which I think we delivered something really special and very unique. On top of that, and I'll shut up, is I had no idea. I was writing this because I have a couple friends in Hollywood to make sure it was going to be an easy movie to make, but I had no idea it was going to be also a pandemic friendly movie. When we were talking to Michael Bay and a few others, they were like, hey, this is a very pandemic friendly movie to make. And I was like, well, great. That's good for me.
Well, why is it pandemic friendly?
It's a set that you could control. There's not 5,000 extras jammed into one room. So it's a cat and mouse on an aircraft carrier going through these ships, passageways. And so it's very easy to just have a few characters and separate them and build a custom set. I was talking to John Davis, who I really like and respect. He did Courage Under Fire and Behind Enemy Lines. And he said, he's like, military may not like this, but because there's flawed characters in the book, and unfortunately the military doesn't like to be portrayed in real time. And I didn't want to make a raw military movie. I wanted to make a complex kind of thriller, closed door murder mystery. But John was like, hey, this military may not like it, but we can go use the Intrepid in New York or the Midway in San Diego and get an aircraft carrier regardless, and use FX and build a set. And this will be a very easy one for us to do.
So this novel, though, this is this one you wrote. So with your partner, John, this one you wrote from beginning to end. The romance novels from beginning to end, Laura wrote.
Correct.
So there's a wide variety of things I'm curious about. First off, with the romance novel, and by the way, it's very interesting you brought up John Grisham, because at the time there might have only been a handful of legal thrillers when he wrote The Firm. I mean, I think there was, what was that Harrison Ford movie? Was it Presumed Innocent?
I think so.
That might have been like really the only thing out there at the time when The Firm came out. Like, legal thrillers was a new category, and Grisham was a great writer. I've recently started and stopped reading 2 different thrillers, and it's very easy to write a bad genre book, and at the same time, it's deceptively hard to write a good thriller book. Like, I read like a Brad Thor book, for instance, or a good John Grisham book, and they're just great at like cliffhangers at the end of every chapter. You get right into the story right away. I am not a snob about thrillers. I read a lot of literary fiction, but I also read a ton of genre fiction, and I appreciate a good page turning thriller or science fiction or whatever. And it's a very different style than literary fiction. But I always appreciate the page turning, the cliffhanger like style, the short chapters, the get to the heart of the story right away. And the bad ones just suck. Like they're just awful. And
Yeah.
I just tried reading. I won't say the names of the authors, but I just tried reading two thrillers in a row, two different authors, and they were horrible. I just could not.
Yeah.
As soon as I put them down, I completely forgot what I had read, and I decided it wasn't worth it. I was going to stop. But
So I totally am with you there because I read a lot also. And look, the market we'll see how it'll do, but I do know that the team that bought it at Random House was the team behind Game of Thrones
Hmm,
books,
hmm.
and they were like, "This is incredible." It's not only like you guys did a really good job, but this is something that's very unique and no one has done before, and I like that. I like
So what will the category be? Like,
it's you know what it's funny because John and I were asking them when when we were at auction, we're like, what category do you see this? And it really is a blend of kind of crime fiction and military fiction. So like Tom Clancy, has a baby with a crime fiction author.
what do you think is the difference between mystery and thriller, if there is one?
You know what? I honestly don't know. I won't bullshit you.
Maybe there isn't one.
Yeah, maybe there isn't a distinction.
But okay, and then on romance, I'll ask a similar question, which you may or may not know the answer. But what is a romance novel? Like, obviously, two people fall in love, and problems. They solve the problems. But is there any what's the formula of a romance novel?
I mean, to me, the formula is, it has to be a complete narrative, right? You have to have some type of conflict. And then the resolution and there's a lot of sex on the way to this resolution. Of course, the steamy sex scenes are key ingredients. But then the resolution denouement is, they the woman gets her man type of thing, and maybe there's a little bit of cliffhanger at the end, but you have to create some resolution. I mean, I can always tell somebody that doesn't know what they're doing writing because it's an incomplete narrative, right? You're just like, either this doesn't make sense because they didn't explain enough background, or there's no conflict, or there's just no end. The book ends and you're like, what the hell just happened to me?
Well,
There's no resolution.
What's a potential? What keeps the lover? I've never read a romance novel actually. So what keeps the lovers apart usually? Like, what's an example?
In this case, in the military wife, you have a guy that a wife that loses her husband in combat, so she's a widow. The best friend is like consoling her, and then they develop a romantic interest, ultimately. So there's usually, and the conflict is, how do you be the grieving widow, and then you feel guilty because you're having these feelings towards your dead husband's best friend, and it's just all sorts of stuff, and that stuff happens for real. I've been there.
Is that big enough to be a conflict?
There's other conflict you can introduce as well, but yeah, I mean, you're talking, having to get the body back and have a funeral and family, and you have the in-laws, the ex-in-laws, like wanting to spend time with the grandkids. Okay, who's this new guy? The best friend is conflicted, right? Because he's like, oh, how do I fall in love with my dead friend's wife? I think in that case, definitely enough conflict going on there to create a ton of tension and stress. And then, of course, you got to have the steamy sex scenes.
And then how does a conflict like that get resolved? Like, other than They just say, throw up their hands and say, we might as well just do this.
Well, I don't want to ruin it for the reader that wants to go read Military Wife, but it's it's just two characters kind of working through things like we do in real life. It's not always clean and neat. It's messy, and it's like, okay, maybe it's moving out of the town, starting a new life somewhere else. The guy getting out of the military, so he kind of leaves that behind, that kind of thing. But that's the fun of writing fiction for me. Is and my formula was I read Stephen King's On Writing, because I'd never, aside from a couple articles in when I got out of the military in 2006, I wrote a few articles for like FHM around fictional sniper missions, and it was fun stuff, but very short, 1,500, 2,000 words. And it was based on, just like the book I finished, on real events. But still, fiction is very tough, it's very tough compared to nonfiction, for me anyway. Nonfiction, I outline it. I know my background, my conflict, my kind of rising action, the resolution denouement is all there before I even start. When I started writing the book is called Steel Fear. At least that'll be the title, unless the Random House changes it. I roughly knew the shape of it in my head, but I just started writing, and then stuff just happens and comes to life, because it's like one idea leads to another one. But it's very different writing than nonfiction, for sure. That's why, I have a ton of respect for people that write in fiction, because it's a lot of work.
Yeah, when you were writing this, well, you had John Mann help you, but were you very did it feel different than writing nonfiction? Because it was close to nonfiction. It paralleled experiences in your life.
Yeah, but I had no idea how it was going to end. I wanted to create complex characters. I wanted to create flawed characters. Like our main kind of hero is very flawed, and he's a suspect, in the book. I don't want to ruin it for the readers, but I created this environment. You're like, I don't know who the hell did it.
What was the challenge for you? What did you learn about fiction writing this one with John?
Well, so I had written I got a pretty good way along, and then I brought John into the process, and John read what I sent him, and he's like, okay, this is great. I love the characters. I think we need some more work to kind of, build some more complex backstory. But so we started collaborating. But when I was working alone, I would get up in New York at 5 a.m. and I would just commit to write for an hour every morning, have my cup of coffee. And sometimes I got, 5,000 words. Sometimes it was 500. But I just did it every day. And sometimes I was just like, wow, this is really, I don't know, it must be something that unlocks in your brain where the creativity starts happening and stuff starts coming to life. And you're just like, oh, I'm seeing all sorts of things. And it is a very scary book. My mom wouldn't read it. She started on one of the paragraphs because the killer uses succeline, which is a paralytic that anesthesiologists use. But by itself, it completely paralyzes the victim, but they can feel pain. They're conscious and they can feel pain. They just can't move. They're frozen. And one of the scenes, this guy uses it, sticks his victim in the neck, and proceeds to peel off the face while the victim's alive. So it's just twisted shit.
And did you start it off like with a crime in progress, like with the predator and doing his thing?
It was, it was that, and it was somebody on the run. And the one thing I don't know whether I learned this, and I can't remember if it was a TED Talk or something else, but I was doing research when I wanted to get into fiction, and it was like, you've got to hook them right away. If you don't, and this is even in the movies, if you're not hooked right away and you don't have that kind of emotional investment, you got to get them invested in this book immediately, or else you're just like, I mean, we've all read those books where you're like 50 pages in, and you're like, man, this sucks. Like, when the hell is something going to happen here? And so, in my personal opinion, we had to have a really strong hook. The one thing that our editor at Random House already mentioned, and my agent Alyssa, she's like, we got to keep the pace up. You got to just make this thing a page turner. And so we necked it down from 150,000 words to 90,000. And our new editor is like, hey, I think we can even speed it up more. And she's already had some really good input on, creating more doubt up front with a few characters, but speeding up the pace.
How do you speed up the pace? What's a technique for that?
I mean, look, I'm a rookie, right? But what my agent and my editor Anne have both said is, we've got to get to things. You're getting to things quicker. Like, the dialogue is good, but don't, like, what can we remove and take out of place to kind of get to the next scene, right? So don't let the scenes drag on. Just like in a movie, it's like you can have these intense moments or scenes in the book, but okay, and then on to the next one.
It always makes me think of like TV shows. You always see people just hang up the phone and never say goodbye. Like, no one ever says, okay, see you later. All right, goodbye. Like, that never happens on TV, because it's like, just, you have to cut out like every extra word.
And I love the cliffhanger too. Like, you can cliffhang a chapter and make it kind of foreshadowing and then transition into a totally different environment. But when you get, maybe 2 chapters later, you pick it up again where that cliffhanger ended, and the reader's like, oh, thank God. Now I'm getting into this part. I can figure out what the hell is going to happen. So it's one of the things John and I talked about, actually, was we want to analyze this book and say, because we're already working on book number 2, but what's the formula? Like, cause I'm like, I like structure. I like checklists from the military as a pilot. I just want to check the box. Okay. Do we have like these 3 or 4, like, really detailed, iconic scenes in the book that are going to burn into the reader's head? Cause we used to study memory drills, and we used to teach like how to kind of biohack short-term memory, whether it's, remembering complex numbers like license plates, but linking, I don't know if you heard of linking before, but linking is a way to do that. And you imagine the reason you remember stuff is either it's very traumatic and it just has an impact on your memory, or you create these images in your head to remember someone's name, like Kamal, for instance, our mutual friend. If I was meeting him for the first time, I put this stuffed camel on his head, and now Kamal Camel. But next time I see Kamal, I see the camel on his head, the fluffy stuffed camel, and I'm like, oh, Kamal, but the point is, you want to create a scene that's so memorable and vivid and visceral and we have those in this book. But John and I were talking about, okay, how many is enough? Is it 2? Is it 3? What's the minimum? So we're kind of like dissecting this to make the next book, make sure that it has all the components to be a really good book. Because I don't know if anyone's done that. I've watched on a ton of authors, whether it's Masterclass or TED Talks, but everyone seems to kind of have their own way. But as you know as well, there's got to be a formula. If you follow this formula, at least you're gonna make sure you're not gonna miss anything or leave anything out.
Well, there's like the basic arc of the hero, right? So you have some reluctant hero who gets a call to action. Maybe he rejects it at first, but then kind of the old wise man says, no, you gotta do this. And some inciting incident happens that puts him on the adventure, and the problems get bigger and bigger, and he meets more and more friends to help him along the way, and the enemies get bigger and bigger, and maybe there's a resolution in the middle, and that seems big, but it keeps on going. There's a bigger one, and then finally he returns home to tell the story.
Yeah,
that's kind of like the classic arc of the hero. That's Jesus.
With that, and that part that's a whole nother conversation. But that to your point, it's true. Like that kind of hero's journey has been figured out, but how many friends on the journey? How many enemies? How many challenges? How many obstacles do you throw in the way? Like how big do you and complex do you build it to make it super interesting? Or maybe if you overdo it, you lose people, right? It's just like too much for somebody to kind of dive into. Even like Lord of the Rings, I'm a huge fan of Lord of the Rings, but there was, on that first book, The Hobbit, there was only a handful of heroes on that journey, right? And then you only have a handful of kind of bad guys. So it's not, the world is magical and complex, but the characters aren't, they're not massive in number.
It always makes me, so I think of 3 genre novels, but in different genres. So I think of Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. I don't know if you ever read that.
Yeah.
So there's one scene in there where, and by the way, I haven't picked up or touched this novel since 1992 maybe, and I never saw the movie. I remember specifically the main vampire. I think his name's Lewis. He's the original vampire in there, and he thinks he's the only vampire in the world, if I remember correctly. But then at one point, he's walking, and he has super hearing from being a vampire. He's walking, and he stops, and he hears other footsteps like half a mile away, walking and stopping. And then he walks again, and he hears the footsteps start again a half mile away, and then he stops, and then those footsteps stop. And then suddenly you realize there's another vampire who's aware of him, who's right near him. You didn't know there were any other vampires in the world, and that's the end of the chapter. So that's like, for me, like that was like a brilliant cliffhanger. And then I think of another one written by a guy, David Levine, who's he's a co-writer on Billions, and he's written a bunch of murder mysteries and or other types of mysteries, detective novels. And just the very first chapter, little boy is riding his bike, car bumps right into the bike, knocks the kid off, takes the kid, puts him in the back of the car, boom, is gone. And that's you starts it off. So the worst possible image for a parent happens in chapter 1. And then the third,
but that's that hook too, right? You get hooked right away. You're bought into that book.
Yeah. And then I guess with The Firm, which is very different from John Grisham's actual first book, which was A Time to Kill, which became his second published book, because A Time to Kill wasn't picked up by any major publisher, so he had to self-publish it or whatever. But The Firm, which was his second book, but his first major book, it basically starts off where this lawyer who's, has all the good intentions in the world is kind of, seduced by the riches of a big fancy law firm. And then you realize, it becomes relatable and rather than thrilling, but it's so relatable. Like we all have good intentions, but maybe if I just take the huge salary for a few years, it'll all be good. And then you get sucked in that way. So it was like 3 different ways of kind of, sucking me into different stories. And, but you're right. I and then literary fiction, I think, has its own pleasures, like just the wordplay and the language and the psychological depth, without having thriller-like aspects and cliffhangers. Yeah. So I love a good written raw novel.
I'll send it to you if you want to read it. It'll be in PDF, but I love your opinion on it.
I'd love to read it. And so because I've been thinking, I always, about 4 years ago or 5 years ago, I gave myself the goal, this is the year I'm going to write my thriller novel. But then I got obsessed with doing stand-up comedy, and that took over. That became like 30 hours a week, because that was hard to do. Stand-up comedy was like, it was like the hardest skill I ever had to kind of develop in. And but I'm thinking this year now, I might try again that thriller novel. I haven't decided yet. I feel the compulsion to do it. Like I love reading those, and I've written 25 books. I just haven't written a thriller novel.
I mean, I think now is a good time, right? Good content is in demand for sure. I've had enough talks with publishers and producers and directors in Hollywood to know that good content is really in high demand. Interestingly enough, now that even the producers and Hollywood directors are thinking, okay, they're warming up to like, okay, let's not do a movie on Netflix, but let's do a limited series, because that, I think they've got the formula. They understand that some movies are meant to be global blockbuster movie theater type events, but now, okay, how's the future going to look a year or two from now? I don't see people packing into the movie theaters anymore. So, but I think it's a great time to write a book. As much as the whole publishing industry as a whole is another topic. One of the reasons I'm happy we went with Penguin is because they're fairly vertically integrated as a publisher. They have, I believe, they own their book printer. They're kind of, when you're vertically integrated like they are, they can really control the supply chain. And like many other publishers are in a pretty tight spot these days. I feel like the pandemic has made people read more, so digital ebooks, audiobooks, physical books, but they're not buying them in the bookstores. But the industry is due for further disruption, I guess is my point.
Do you think people are reading? Like, and the reason I ask is I just notice in general, like on articles, just across the board. Like I was talking to some big writers of articles, like big bloggers, and they were all telling me across the board their page views are down, but podcast listens are up. Like more people will listen. Many, a huge multiple will listen to this as a multiple of the average readers of the average book.
Yeah, I think it depends. And it's just my guess. I feel like I still run a digital media publishing company. All of our page views and unique visits are way up.
Oh, it's interesting.
We're up 40% on the year. Paid subscribers are up as well. But we have, the behind the paywall, we have video and digital print essentially, and some ebooks, and all that stuff is up. But I feel like people are generally, audiobooks are, people kind of seem like they discovered audio. Wow, this is a great thing to listen to in the car, the commute, podcasts as well. But I think like content is just in high demand. It's being consumed in different ways, but they have more time on their hands for sure, I believe, with the pandemic.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players, and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So, I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money, and I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply. Here's another question. So, like, after World War II or after Vietnam, a lot of the initial wave of books were about World War II or Vietnam. So, for instance, after World War II, that was really the creation of, writers like Norman Mailer or, James Jones with From Here to Eternity, even Kurt Vonnegut, Joseph Heller, Joseph Heller with Catch-22, Kurt Vonnegut with Slaughterhouse-5.
I love that book.
Yeah. And then Vietnam, you have a lot of Vietnam books, but I'm like Tim O'Brien's been on the podcast with The Things They Carried. It's such a beautiful book. And, I wonder if post-pandemic, you kind of need to first have a wave of pandemic-related books. I don't know. But on the flip side, too, is I feel like I'm sick of the pandemic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, me too. I mean, I feel like we are going to see those types of books. Like, there's, it's the zombie stuff has always been big, right? It was big before the pandemic, but now it's like, the pandemic, and maybe it's the Civil War that erupts and fractures America. Who the hell knows? But yeah, I'm probably going to see that kind of stuff for sure.
And so you're going to write a sequel to this military thriller?
Yeah, we have our main character who's kind of finishes the book as a hero, but has some major issues unresolved, and we're kind of trying to resolve some of that in book 2. We've got a great kind of like hero, like SEAL. We'll share this. We've got it set up as a SEAL versus SEAL scene in there, so I feel like that's fascinating to me because the SEAL community is a great community, but by nature of 20 years of warfare, burning these guys out, over traumatizing them, it's done some real damage psychologically, and the result of that is you can just see spill out into the press, right? A lot of guys have done really bad stuff, and they're getting, some of them are addicted to like substance abuse issues, stuff like that. So I feel like that'll be an interesting one to kind of tackle and show. You have this kind of villain where people maybe feel sorry for him, like, man, I don't blame this guy for kind of going off the rails, because look at all he's been through, and then he just got spit out of this meat grinder of combat with very little support from the government and the VA, and he's just kind of out in the civilian world and just kind of fallen in with organized crime, stuff like that. So that'll be very cool, and I have tons of material to work with on that. But I feel like it will open people's eyes up to kind of some of the issues that have been going on in the military community.
And what were the economics of, okay, you are about to officially close this book deal, and then the movie guys got in right away, and your agent approached them, and
I ended up switching to WME.
Who's your agent there?
Hillary Zeitz.
Okay, yeah, I'm with WME as well for writing.
Yeah. So I stayed with Paradigm for literary, but film and TV I went for. I switched to WME because I'm really happy with my agent Alyssa. She's amazing, and Hillary right away. It was just a night and day from what I was getting for film and television, and she's just been a rock star. So she's got this in the hands of some very big people, and got us a bidding process. So, and her point was, wow, this is very unique and unusual, and it's pandemic friendly to make us, limited series or movie out of this. So, and people are dying for that kind of content.
And if it gets bought, what's the odds that it gets made?
I'm not going to do it unless it gets made. So that's been our strategy from the get-go. We're not just optioning this off, because I've been down that road. I sold the TV rights for The Red Circle to Nina at CBS. She bought it the same day. Mark Harmon was my partner on that project. When she left CBS, they scrapped all of her projects, and Harmon actually got the rights to the book back. We got to keep the advance, and then that Navy SEALs series on CBS is what I pitched them. They made it anyway.
Oh, that's horrible.
Which kind of sucks, but that's show business sometimes.
I've
unfortunately
had stuff like that happen. Like I think it was about 7 or 8 times. I should write this up. It's about 7 or 8 times I've gotten so close. I've been inside every TV network, everybody interested in everything. I've gotten so close. I've been with networks where it's like going to get done, and then someone gets fired, and boom, that's it. Or then I see this show with the exact same title show up on a sister network, owned by the same parent company, and it's just so. I don't want to say it's frustrating. I always kind of blow that off, but psychologically, I'm even more flattered that stuff gets done. But So,
I would be lying if I said it didn't piss me off, but I'm over it. I mean, some things you just got to take on the chin, right? I don't want to be known as a litigious IP holder in Hollywood. And I have a friend who's an entertainment lawyer, and they do due diligence on that stuff. And a lot of people don't realize. So I'm like, I got plenty more where that came from. In this case.
Yeah, that's how I always feel.
Yeah. And so, you try and learn and for the next one. And so for this one, we're structuring this deal, to get enough money to where they're obviously making a serious financial commitment, very short timeline to develop. And if they don't make it, then we get the money and we get the rights back. That's kind of how we're structuring it. But the conversation right out of when they ask, hey, Brandon, what do you have to ask of us? I say, well, I want to know what you're going to do to get this book made into a film or series project. And because I don't want to do this with somebody that's just going to sit on it. Like I want to see it made in a couple of years. So,
I mean, you should have them pay you more money if they don't make it.
Yeah,
that would be really way to guarantee it. Because it sort of sounds a little structurally like an option. Like if they don't make it, you get the rights back.
Yeah, I mean, look, nothing in life is guaranteed, right? So, but I feel like we can structure the financial incentives to make sure the project gets done. And the good news is, it's a very unique piece of IP. We own the IP. It's going to be a big book. That Random House invested a lot in this book, so they're gonna make it a big book. It's got a lot of momentum going forward at a time when these kind of projects are in high demand, and there's very few that can be made, and are kind of like a perfect fit for this pandemic movie environment that they're dealing with right now, having to kind of limit the amount of people on set and in certain scenes. So,
and when's it going to come out, the book?
We just got our pub date. It will be August of next year. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, it is funny how long it takes though. Like I recently delivered a finished book to my publisher, and it's March 23rd of next year. But it is what it is with publishers. And that's probably the right timing anyway. Get the election over with, get the inauguration over with, and then have a book come out.
Yeah. I mean, God, talk about your Civil War comment. With this upcoming election, it's going to be I'm not looking forward to it. But I would say, though, this is kind of my old sniper instructor hat on. When I worked in the sniper course, we invested a lot of curriculum development into positive psychology. And I see, people get kind of a little bit down in the pandemic. There are a tremendous amount of opportunities right now. I sold a business in the pandemic. I was able to kind of shore up my media company. I started tigergummies.com, which launches in September, not next month. In September, I promoted my VP of marketing, Alda, to run that company because she's an amazing woman and amazing marketer. Like, and kids, it's a vegan, all natural gummy. And then in that kind of health and wellness space, I looked at the market study. And I was like, there's no real big direct to consumer vitamin brand right now. You got Flintstone vitamins. All the big guys are in retail outlets, and they're in these cheesy plastic bottles. We're doing all natural packaging, vegan gummies, like, everything about it is environmentally friendly. I'm like, I think that business is going to take off. So I feel like these people are just kind of like twiddling their thumbs, sitting at home. Like, there has never been a better time to kind of do something, whatever it is that you want to do.
I agree with you. I was thinking about this the other day, and here's the kind of economic model, or the entrepreneurial model, the way I think about it. So a lot of people look at the economy in a very one-dimensional way, which is the economy is either up or down. And when it's down, everything's bad. And when it's up, everything's good. And, a lot of times the economy does work like that, but certainly not in a situation like this, and whatever. Then there's a kind of a two-dimensional model, which is that which is kind of best explained by this saying, at any given moment, some industry is in a bull market. So even when there's a recession, some industries might do very well. And you could argue like there's some two-dimensionality in here. Like, for instance, obviously the economy is in some sort of recession, or it's damaged, or it's massively down or broken. But we're video conferencing this podcast. Video conferencing obviously is in a huge bull market. A lot of tech is in a bull market. Gaming is in a bull market. I mean, NVIDIA, which makes the big gaming chips,
self-storage too. My son and I bought a self-storage facility in north of Orlando, and it's up.
Right. And so, and then I'm thinking, but there's also sometimes when the economy is three-dimensional. So, and what I mean by that is the economy right now does not look at all like the prior economy. There's no such thing as a new normal where we kind of go back to where it was, but things are just tweaked a little bit. Like what we had, every government in the world has airdropped trillions of dollars onto the economy. Those trillions of dollars have not really been spent, but they will be. And the industries that those trillions of dollars get spent on might be brand new. Like for instance, you said there was no direct to consumer healthy vitamin brand. That's a new industry because people aren't going to store, and it makes sense in the way that the world has shifted. People aren't going to stores where they have to touch and deal with people. So direct to consumer is becomes much bigger. Everybody's worried about health, of course, and safety. So it's just natural that here is a brand new industry that's going to develop. Another one might be, and I've talked about this on some other podcasts, but another one might be setting up a compliance consulting company for either Fortune 500 companies or schools. Are you coronavirus compliant based on health, the rules of the state, the rules of the government? What products do you need? Almost like, we'll talk about this too. Almost like your crate box business. I can imagine building a coronavirus compliance crate box business for schools. Here's all the gloves. Here's all the masks. Here's all the disinfectants. Here's the ultraviolet lights. State by state, the rules are different. And I would say there's like 50 to 100 or 1,000 new industries that are on the rise, that are in inning zero right now, and $1 trillion is still out there to be spent on them. And it sucks to be. If you're one of the 1 out of 3 people in the U.S. that have been laid off, it sucks. But there's still opportunity, and that's what we're in right now.
And even Bezos talked about is, I ended up on a YPO call with the guy, the founder of BlackRock, but he got to sit down and talk to Bezos, and he's like, my job is to remove friction, identify friction. Sometimes friction is problems, right? And with COVID, it has introduced a ton of friction in all of our lives, with school, right? Like my friends in New York who have small children are like, okay, what's going to happen? They know this preschool is not telling them whether they're not going to be virtual or in person because they want to get them to pay the tuition so they can go, you're going to get some, crappy 2-hour Zoom call. They're like, no, we don't want to do that. So now they're like, what do we do? Do we just hire a Columbia student to teach our, kids for 2 hours a day? So there's just all this friction out there, to your point, in the marketplace, because we are dealing with all this new stuff, and there's tons of opportunity. My point is, I didn't want to brag by listing these kind of accomplishments, but I wanted to let people know, like, very grounded, and name some of the accomplishments that I've done, because it's about your attitude. You could have this kind of like down, oh God, the virus, I'm stuck at home, I can't do anything for the summer. Because even my friends are like, oh, you can't bring your kids down to Puerto Rico. I'm like, why not? I can bring them down. They just have to wear a mask on the plane. I found, rather than, a summer camp, I found a scuba shop that was willing to do private instruction. I got my kids all basic to advanced scuba certified. And we had a great summer together. So it's just more about, just reminding yourself that, like, we're in charge of our own self, and, don't let the media and all this bad shit put you in a bad mood, and in a mood that doesn't, that closes down thinking around all the opportunities that are out there. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
I agree, but let me ask you one thing, because in general, I would say that has been my view, and I started off in this lockdown very much playing a role of interpreting the data for. I don't want to say the layperson, because I'm also a layperson, but I just saw a lot of misinformation around the data, and so because of this podcast, I was able to have on scientists, epidemiologists, economists. So for those first 3-4 months, a lot of it for me was providing a service of hey, here's just a common sense way of viewing at all these different streams of data that are very much polarized and blah, blah, blah. And but for the first time, and look, we've all been through 9/11. We all, I lived at ground zero. And then in the recession of 2008, 2009, I was on CNBC all the time. I lived on Wall Street. I was optimistic through that whole time. But this time is maybe the first time in these 20 plus years where I see a path to disaster.
Yeah.
I've never seen a path to disaster before. Not even in the Great Recession. Everyone was saying, oh, capitalism is over. All the banks, your ATM machine is not going to work. The system's going to run out of money. No, it's not. Everyone needs to relax, whatever. But this time, there are some flavors of this. And again, small chance, but I've never before seen an actual pathway that could lead to disaster.
Yeah, I agree with you. We had a Harvard professor, business school professor, come speak to us a couple years ago, and he said if we don't all, like the leaders of the business community, don't kind of start thinking about how to make the world better, attack the income disparity in this country, we will be on a path of destruction. Like he laid it out very simply. He's like, America's not the greatest place anymore to live. We don't have all this opportunity. The land, like America used to be about showing up at nothing and being able to have this massive opportunity. The data says if you're born into a rich family, you have way more chance of and way more opportunity. So America now, like today, or this was 2 years ago, the data set was very similar to South America and Russia even, that it really did matter what class you're born into. Now, look, America's still a great country, but he gave this whole speech, and I was like you mentioned, I'm watching the pandemic and thinking, wow, like the haves, like all the people with money got the hell out of New York, right? Like my friends are in the Hamptons, Connecticut, Florida, California, island somewhere, and the poor are kind of screwed. And I briefed my team. I remember in March, I said, look, you guys just really have to make sure you're taking care of your family, you're safe, you're healthy. But I said, civil unrest is likely coming. Like, I don't know what it will look like, but just be extra cautious and careful because it's a boiling point. And I remember Alda, my VP of marketing, when this all thing was blowing up, she's like, I thought you were being a little bit alarmist, but she's like, God damn, like you called it. She was like, and I was like, it's just, I've looked at this enough before to kind of see the little signs. So, I to your point, I think it's a small chance, but there's a lot of volatility in America right now in politics, the income divide.
And I'm not so sure there's an easy solution because I think the words income divide are a lot more nuanced than people think. It's not just that Jeff Bezos has $150 billion and someone else makes minimum wage. It's that we've had generations of people going to ever increasingly expensive higher education institutions to get a leg up on life and getting into greater and greater debt. And so the rich who go to these educational institutions don't get into the debt. They marry other people not in the debt. They have kids not in the debt. And everybody else is getting more and more in debt. And then the people who haven't been going to those colleges, they're also screwed. I mean, that's why college now is even more in question than ever before. I mean, I've been pushing this for a long time, but I think it's a multi-generational thing which got us here, and it's going to be a multi-generational thing which will get us out. But maybe there'll be some band-aids, like some kind of whether one agrees with them or not, whether it's a UBI or I don't like using the word reparations, but just some kind of like massive payment into the system. And maybe the U.S. can afford it because there's still so much demand for the dollar that people forget when we print up money, that increases the supply, but value is a function of supply and demand. And right now the demand is there from around the world for the US dollar. So that's fortunate for us. So maybe there is enough demand that we can help people out directly. But And that's a very different thing economically than what would normally work as an economic policy. But we're in very strange times now too.
Yeah, I'm not generally a fan of UBI. Like I feel like some short-term relief in the pandemic is good, but I mean I like the simple model of rebuilding American infrastructure, bringing pharmaceutical industry back on shore, like identifying like a lot of these issues that we just didn't realize were a problem and now clearly are, and that gives people purpose. People, I think, generally want to work. They want to.
Oh yeah,
they want to be productive. So rather than just give them the handout.
I agree. I mean, my whole reasoning there is, well, I have a couple of reasons, but I think people just need to calm down. And I hate to put it this way, I think we almost need to pay off people to calm down. That does not, by the way, as an economic theory, that is horrible. That is the worst economic theory. You cannot run a society that way. And I would not say as a philosophy of economics that it works, but I'm just thinking you almost need a short-term Band-Aid to like give time to have the real solutions work. Because here's what will happen, and this is what's going to happen with the trillions of dollars in stimulus already. I don't know how active you are. If you play poker?
I like poker, but I haven't played in a long time.
So in poker, there's a saying, you always want to sit immediately to the left of the weakest player at the table, because that person will bet, you raise, everyone drops out, and it's just you versus the weakest player. And so gradually all that, there's another saying, money tends to go clockwise around the poker table. So the weakest player his chips will ultimately be your chips. When you just blindly throw trillions of dollars in the economy, it's not going to solve the problem, because it's going to end up in the hands of the smartest economic players. Yeah. Like if you just give money to people and they don't know what to do with the money, it's going to end up in the hands of people who do know what to do with the money. It works exactly like poker. Yeah. But
and like a lottery ticket, right? Like a winner, because usually that winner is not financially savvy, and the money, like that money's gone very quickly.
Right, like they give it to the
same reasons.
Yeah, exact same reasons. So like that's why I say it might just be like a payoff so that everything just calms down. And then, like you say, you offer job guarantees, you have infrastructure projects, and you need, and I think the problem with FDR's New Deal, I think the intentions were okay, but it just wasn't enough money injected into the system to replace the money that had been lost in the system. And they never quite caught up until World War II when they started inflating things. It never quite caught up to all the money that had been lost in the system. And I think today's economists, or at least the Federal Reserve, understands a lot better how much money has been lost in the system during this time, so they're able to quickly replace it if need be. Yeah. But this we're going off a more of an economic tangent, and I think there's no real answer. But I think the common answers are probably not 100% correct anymore. There's probably some nuances.
And I'd say added to that, and I've followed a couple of your tweets, and I agree with what you're saying about, especially the latest one about the Washington Post, right? The environment that we're creating for ourselves is one where we cannot have civil debate and discourse. It's like, if you're not on if you're not on Trump's side, we don't want to hear from you. If you're not, a liberal, well, then everything Trump does is bad. It's just like you can't express strong opinions in a respectful way and have a civil debate. It's just, we're censoring, like we're pressuring social media platforms to censor certain types of speech and not censor other types of speech. And people are afraid they're afraid of their own shadows now on social media. And very few people are kind of speaking up or have the ability to speak up without risk, right?
Yeah.
Because even my own agent called me and she's like, Brandon, please don't post anything political on social media. We're trying to get this book deal done and the movie. Like, just don't. I know you like to drop these bombs sometimes. I'm like, all right, I'll stick to photos of the kids scuba diving and we'll just play it safe, So and that kind of sucks because I like to throw it out there and just kind of nudge people and get a debate going on topics, whether it's the economy, politics, all that stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's even the tweets, and I am so apolitical. It's ridiculous. Like, I actually do not give a shit about any politics because I just sort of feel like you're either paying off one crime syndicate or you're paying off another crime syndicate, and that's kind of underlined by the whole, I don't know, all these scandals like with Jeffrey Epstein. It's both parties. It's every intellectual strata. It's every political and economic strata. So, you kind of just have to like take care of yourself, take care of your friends, take care of your family, be a good person and work on ideas. And fortunately, as you mentioned, there is a lot of opportunity now for new and creative ideas. Like, I love how you're structuring things as experiments, and then the experiments that seem to work, you're doubling down on. And that's, if everybody did that, we would certainly have no political problems right now. But of course, not everyone's gonna do that. Well, last thing you mentioned earlier, you sold the crate business. What was that like? So you had a business, basically, people who were interested in Navy SEALs and military would get a box from you once a month with spy binoculars and batons to beat people up and whatever.
So 8 years ago, I started one website called softrep.com, and that essentially was news and military news, foreign policy news, and entertainment. We did podcasts, videos. So now we have a small we're streaming kind of news and entertainment. But I have this fan base that was into military content. Most of them are similar demographic to UFC, like high income earning males. They're fascinated with military content and they want to read about it and listen and watch the videos. And so I had seen the advertising industry getting disrupted and looking for other ways to monetize and said, okay, let's get into e-commerce. And we had a gear review website as a part of our company, and people were always asking us, what products do I buy? What's a Navy SEAL knife look like? Because I'll tell you this, there's a few companies out there that said the official watch or official knife, and it's usually bullshit. So these guys were coming to us like, what boots, what knives, what tent do I buy? And so we created the Crate Club, and it was kind of this curated outdoor survival, Navy SEAL in a box experience. And it blew up. Like, it was launched kind of in the sweet spot of the subscription box craze, right? Everybody wanted it. It was like, I want a freaking, the dog box, the coffee box, whatever it was. And so it blew up, and I'll be very honest, it got too big too fast. I didn't hire well. I have a soft spot in my heart for hiring veterans, and I ended up making a really, really bad hire, and this guy almost put me out of business. He ended up getting addicted to drugs and alcohol. He was on the product side, so he was spending money on purchase orders like a drunken sailor, and we ended up with $2 million in inventory that we didn't need or want. And so that business did not need to carry inventory. It was like Dell Computer. You sell the box, whether it's a premium box for $1,200 a year, the box is going to have so much value, and you just put whatever parts you want into it. But you put the parts in and send it out, but you don't carry any inventory if you manage the process well. And I did not manage it well. And so I went back to, I was dealing with all these issues, and at the time I just realized, I uncovered this guy who I tried to save. I gave him severance, tried to put him into rehab, and he ended up dying of an overdose last year, which
oh
sucked.
my gosh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it sucks. And it's,
I think I knew about this guy. I didn't know, I guess I hadn't talked to you about this since that happened.
Yeah. We never talked specifically about this. And, business isn't all, what people see on social media, right? So I'm like, holy shit, I have all these problems. Like, I got to put systems in place. And so I went to this Harvard Business School 2-year program, which is tailored for owners. So it's not a traditional MBA. And you're with 100 people of all over the world that have all these incredible businesses, from a bauxite mine in Africa to a telecommunications conglomerate in Brazil, like just really cool people. And I So I came out of this program going, okay, I know now I got some tools and I got this group of people I can lean on. I need to make some changes. So I was making those changes and the pandemic hit, and I'm like, holy shit. My warehouse, my third party logistics warehouse took me from net 30 to net 15 to cash on delivery to ship. Vendors were going out of business. Some vendors were getting net 60 terms, and all of a sudden, hey, we can't give you net 60 terms. We need a 30% deposit. And I'm like looking at our cash flow going, there's no way I can sustain this. Like I'm trying to dig out of this $2 million in inventory issue, like AP buildup. And I had to call and renegotiate all this AP with either send it back or renegotiate it with a lot of vendors who were looking forward to getting paid, a $250,000 in 60 days. And now I'm saying it's going to be 6 months. And so it was an extremely challenging environment. And I had talked to one of our largest competitors in the space, company called BattleBox. They loved the Crate Club brand. They loved what we had built. And I went to those guys, and I had a bank come in and try and help me. Fucking bank didn't get anything done. I got it done. And of course, once I get this thing process going, the bank's like knocking on the door. Hey, let's help you. And I'm like, no, get the hell out of the way. And so I sold the business. And I got a good deal on it. It was a great deal for us.
They took over your inventory?
I ended up doing mostly an owner finance deal for these guys, but they basically solved all the problems I was having overnight because they had their own warehouse. They were very good at delivering value, delivering they eliminated the third party logistics by shipping themselves. So a lot of things, and they were just generally good guys, and they wanted to keep the brand and keep it. And so they took over the business in May. And it was a 7-figure exit for me, and it was great. And it took this weight off my shoulders and then focus on, okay, let me stabilize my media business, which is much smaller business, but very profitable, recurring revenue. Cause we have, we have about, today we have about 10,000 paid subscribers. By the end of the year, we'll be at over 20,000. Very, very good margin business. And it was able to let me take a bet on the Tiger gummy business, and get that off the ground. But anyway, that's the story. The Crate Club, it was a classic, as you see in a lot of companies that scale, you have a lot of problems to solve. And if you don't solve them, shit starts breaking. So but sometimes you don't recognize it, right? But I was at least able to go, okay, I know these symptoms, and I can stop some of it, but I need to solve this quickly. And so
how'd you find the company that was the acquirer?
You know what? Typically what I see happen is usually when you're in an industry, and we were kind of like neck and neck, usually your top 3, 2-3 competitors. You all know each other, you all respect each other, and there's some type of dialogue going on. And that's what I had.
It's an important lesson, by the way, that I don't know what you call it, like co-opetition but like every time I've been in an industry, I always made sure I was friends with my competitors, to the point where if I was in the same town as them, we can go out to dinner and then be cutthroat the next day. But you always want that because A, it's a source of information, and B, it's situations like you're describing.
Yeah. And I think you see it a lot of that. It shows up in a lot of areas, right? Even professional sports, like the people at the top of the sport respect each other. Typically there's a dialogue, and companies compete, and it's okay to compete. But usually those top competitors have a level of kind of respect for their top competition. And so that's what I had. And to your point, I did exactly what you did. We had talks about the market, what's the challenges, what are they doing shipping, how do they feel about shipping themselves over the 3PL, which I had. And then when I realized that I had these issues in the business, I was able to reach out to them right away and get a dialogue going and structure a deal that was good for them and good for me, and do it myself without an investment bank in the mix.
Yeah. Well, look, congratulations on that. Congratulations on your romance novels. Congratulations on the military thriller. I can't wait to see the movie. I can't wait to read the book. And I can't wait to talk about how you turn tiger gummies into $1 billion business next time you're on. Or, you'll be on either for the movie or the tiger gummies or whatever the next experiment is that you do. Let me know. Like, you're not that far away from me now. Like, I'm in Key Biscayne. You should fly your plane over here and just like hang out for a day.
I will actually. My girlfriend and I are taking the plane on a road trip, essentially. I'm going to fly it to Missouri, North Dakota, Jackson Hole, Yellowstone, visit my dad in Idaho, down the coast of like Washington, Oregon, California. And then on the way back, I'm going to hit Florida. So I'll stop in and stay. I may ask to sleep on your couch, but
you don't have to sleep on the couch. I've got a room just for you. So
okay.
You're welcome to stay anytime.
Cool.
Well, thanks a lot, Brandon. And don't forget, send me, if you can find it, send me that MBA book data.
Yeah, I'll send you the report. I'm going to send you Still Fear, too. I'm going to send you the novel.
That would be great. Well, once again, Brandon, thank you so much. And I will talk to you the next time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Are you ready to take control of your future and be your own boss? At Neighborly, we'll help you go into business for yourself, but not by yourself. As a Neighborly franchise owner, you'll join a community with thousands of passionate and experienced entrepreneurs. With 19 franchise brands providing a variety of home service needs, you'll benefit from decades of established systems and support. Learn more about Neighborly franchising by downloading your free guide at go.nbly.com/podcast.